Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, and entertainment and give you my thoughts. If you joined us live, super happy to have you. Feel free to drop in the live chat where you're watching from. It'll be interesting to see where everyone's watching the show from tonight. Leave a comment. If at any point during the show you have any comments or questions about any of the topics I'm going to cover, feel free to drop them in the live chat. Like I said, I'll try to keep do my best to keep an eye on it. I have it pulled up over here. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really helps with people finding the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, you should be able to find time codes down in the description to kind of jump around to all the different topics. We stream the show every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And if you haven't already, like I said, please subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Total domestic box office was just a little over 89 million, and it held pretty well, right? So I only dropped about 4%. Again, this is like a weird time of the box office where we're going to have a couple big movies for the rest of the year, but this is really now award season, now that we've moved into October. So we're going to probably see over the next couple of weeks and months films opening lower, and then films that had already opened going wide, right? So, and that'll be something we'll talk about in just a bit of looking ahead to this upcoming weekend's releases. But big story here, of course, is Joker Folie à Deux, the sequel to the 2019 critically acclaimed, in a sense, but perhaps maybe not deservedly, sequel to the 2019 film Joker. This did not turn out very well for Warner Brothers. So it was projected to make about 61 to 75 million for the weekend. And I'm going to do some quick math here. I'm going to pull up the results for the original Joker. So the original Joker in 2019, so 5 years ago, opened to around $96 million domestically. So the projections were already low, right, compared to what the original film had made. And as we got closer and closer to the release, with its festival premiere, I forget where it was. It may have been Venice, or maybe that was the first movie. It didn't really get very good reviews. But the original also did not get very good reviews, especially from the festivals. But it wasn't that it got exclusively bad reviews. It was like very polarizing. Like some people, saying it was like one of the greatest movies they've ever seen, and other people saying this is complete dog shit. This did not have as much polarization. It was a way more loaded towards negative reception. And the word on this movie just got worse and worse and worse. And so by the time you get like actual reviewers, like not going to the festival, but like people reviewing it for this like official theatrical release, once you start getting those reviews, things really were not looking good for this film. Now I'm going to also pull up Rotten Tomatoes, as they would say in England. Joker Folie à Deux has a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. And again, Rotten Tomatoes is way more generous because, again, that percentage is not a 1 out of 10 score. It's the percentage of people giving it at least a positive review. And which they define as like a 60% or higher. So that means only 33% of reviewers gave it at least a 6. It doesn't even mean they gave it super high marks. Do we have a critical consensus score? I don't think so. Usually on here we go. So here's the critic consensus of this film on Rotten Tomatoes. Joaquin Phoenix's eponymous Joker takes the stand in a sequel that dances around while the story remains still, although Lady Gaga's wildcard energy gives Folie à Deux some verve. So the film was just not looking to be, to do very well. So those projections, were about 61 to 75 million, but a week earlier they would have been higher. Like they kept getting smaller and smaller. And then the real death knell that made people before these box office results even came out, people were already predicting this wasn't going to do very well because the cinema scores were not very good. So cinema scores basically, it's a very imperfect model, but it's good for identifying when people don't like something. So it will be like people standing outside of the movie theater if you've ever left the theater and someone has like an iPad, like say what you thought about the movie. And usually just psychologically people want to feel like they didn't waste their time and money. So usually people will give a film they just saw, higher marks than maybe how they really feel. So you always see movies getting so if a movie gets a B plus cinema score, that's a problem, right? Because even with that bias, people still aren't giving it full marks. This got a D. So clearly audiences who arguably were the primary champions of the original film did not really go for this at all. My opinion on the original Joker, some of you have watched my channel and heard me speak about this before. I think it's pretty mediocre. I think it's fine, but it thinks it's way better than it really is and doesn't really understand what makes the Joker interesting as a character. So, I will admit there's a little bit of schadenfreude here on my part, seeing this film not do well, only opening to around 40 million. So not only did it not meet the disappointing projections, it didn't even really come close. It did have the biggest per theater average of the weekend in the top 10, so, good for it. And it did make a lot of money overseas. So its worldwide total is about 121 million. But again, it's off of a $200 million budget. So the thing that made the original Joker such a lightning in a bottle is, again, it was polarizing, but you had enough people who thought it was the second coming of Christ, and considering the film was pretty inexpensive to make, all things considered. I mean, the original Joker was only made for about $55 to $70 million. So when it became a $1 billion plus movie, that was a huge percent return. Clearly everyone involved for the sequel was like, you're going to pay us, Warner Brothers, you really want this movie to be made, you're going to pay us way more. But if you see here, that $200 million budget, I don't think this will remain in the red, as you see over in that right column. I do see it moving past that $200 million mark worldwide, at least. I am dubious about the film's ability to double its budget, to get to 400 million. And the tell will be next week of how big of a drop does it have. But, even if it's able to make back its budget, this is not the runaway success that Warner Brothers was hoping for. They want to try to replicate that original film. So, I mean, I have not seen it. I don't plan on seeing it unless I have to. And, I'm sure if you're Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, you're maybe a little disappointed, especially Lady Gaga, because from what I've heard from the reviews, she's very underutilized, which I feel like if you have Lady Gaga in your film, that's a huge boon to your success, or potential success. Also opening, we had this random documentary called Sam and Colby: The Legends of the Paranormal. I guess it's a spin-off or offshoot of a reality, kind of a ghost hunting show. Again, open in the top 10, only at number 6 though. Made just a little over 1.7 million. Not much to really say there. Though, big announcement, or not announcement, but big news. Whitebird finally came out. So, Whitebird is the semi-sequel / spinoff to the film Wonder, about the real-life boy, Augie, who has all these birth defects and facial deformities. And this film is a strange backdoor spin-off that's really about the bully from the first film, and it's about him hearing a story from his grandmother, played by Helen Mirren, about her experiences during World War II and fighting against not fighting against, but the conflict being a kid in Nazi-controlled Europe. This film was supposed to come out 2 years ago and kept getting pushed back. So I had said last week, I will believe it once I actually see some box office numbers that this movie was actually released and American audiences actually went to go see it. We have this confirmation now, so this film really does exist. And despite the low projections, it also, like Joker, did not meet them. So it was projected to make around 3 to 6 million, only made about $1.5 million. But, I don't know what they were expecting for a film that they basically blew all their marketing money 2 years ago. Because I remember seeing the trailers when I went to the theater and seeing the poster, and I imagine there wasn't as much money left to let people know this movie even existed and was coming out. And if you see, it wasn't super expensive to make, but $20 million compared to its worldwide return of roughly 4.6 million, that's still that's right now it's a a bomb. It's a, you know, I would say if it's over 75%, you know, or if it's over negative 75% return, I would consider that a bomb. Now, of course, it could do well going into the wintry season, the awards season, but you know, I just don't see. There's just going to be so many great movies coming out that I don't really see if there's going to be enough oxygen for this movie to do very well. Continuing into their second weekend, we have The Wild Robot, DreamWorks' newest animated film, dropping from first to second now in its second weekend, bringing in just under 19 million. And this is going to be interesting to watch, right? So this was almost a 50% drop, but just barely made it below that. About, what was it, 47, 48%. Added, a couple dozen theaters. The thing about this movie that I talked about last week is that this is not, they were already anticipating this was not going to open huge, and it didn't really open huge. It fell within the projections, but only opened to like 35 million or so. But the goal of this movie, from what I had read, was to play the long game. That they wanted to, they understood they were not going to have that big splashy opening, but if they can kind of be a consistent player week to week, it could be a success, right? This brings its domestic total to about 64 million and its worldwide total to about a little over 100 million off of a $78 million budget. So it's crossed that initial threshold. Will it cross that additional threshold of doubling the budget? I think so. I've seen the film, my review for it. I didn't have a chance to write it this week, and I'm hoping to write like a little mini review sometime this week. I thought it was great. I thought it was one of the best films I've seen of the year. Chris Sanders directed it, who directed Lilo and Stitch, and then went on to do How to Train Your Dragon, also for DreamWorks. And he's just got the sauce. Like, he just understands how to create stories about unlikely pairings, right? With Lilo and Stitch, and then of course in How to Train Your Dragon, I forget their name, but the boy, and then the dragon, Toothless, right? And then this movie, you have the robot, and you have all the animals and everything. So it's just a really heartwarming film that is both, again, really heartwarming, but not too overly sentimental. So I'm hoping that it's able to make back its money, because that coupled with the animation being so stellar, I hope it could be successful to incentivize DreamWorks and other studios to lean into films like that. And it's arguably the best Pixar film that in the past 10 years, and Pixar didn't even make it, right? Let's see here. Also continuing this week, dropping from 6th to 10th place in its second weekend, Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's epically disastrous, passion project, decades in the making. Only made about a little over $1 million for the weekend, a 74% drop. So again, this is kind of another film that's super, super polarizing. And I think, even if a film's polarizing, when it comes to critical reception, okay, well, polarizing is at least semi-good in that you have a lot of negative, but then a lot of overwhelming praise. But polarizing films rarely play well with audiences, right? Or they're handicapped by polarization. So even if they perform well, they're kind of limited to how well they can perform because of that polarizing nature. It did have the lowest per theater average of the top 10 at just over $500. Because if you think about it, that's only, how much, at least in New York, movie tickets are like $18, $20. So, that might only be like 20 to 50 people per theater going to see this movie, right? This brings its domestic total to a very humble 6.5 million. Worldwide total not much higher at 8.5 million. Again, off of a $120 million budget. So this is shaping up to be one of the biggest bombs in Hollywood history. But again, as Francis Ford Coppola made very clear, and I have said, he's not making this to make money. This is very much a passion project. The guy is not going to be on this earth for much longer. He really just wanted to make this film how he wanted to make it. So I gotta give the guy props. He made the movie he wanted to make exactly how he wanted to make it. And ultimately, if he doesn't care, if other people like it or if it makes money, well, then that's his prerogative because he's a gajillionaire anyway. Looking also at the rest of the top 5, we still have in the top 5 after 5 frames now, dropping from second to third. We have Beetlejuice. And again, this is at this stage, this is just about making every little bit of cash it can. So it made a little over $10 million. I would say now it's in the kind of if you look over in my column, domestic multiple. So for new viewers, that's basically a formula of taking the total domestic box office, dividing it by the domestic opening. So the idea is that you want to have a bigger number as a result of that formula, because that means more of your money is being made after the opening weekend, as opposed to having a really big opening weekend and then dropping off like Megalopolis here, right? So since it's entered this yellow zone, I would say it's having some decent legs, right? I would say yellow's decent, green is really good, blue or purple is like phenomenal, right? Because if you look at these numbers, total domestic is like 266 million. Worldwide's about 403 million off of just a $100 million budget. So again, this is not a slam dunk success for Warner Brothers, but it definitely was worth the investment, being like a 300-something% return, right? Also in the top 5, we have still Transformers 1 in its third weekend, dropping from 3rd to 4th. Only bringing in a little over 5 million. Not a huge drop, but again, this is a film that a lot of people were surprised to see not open very large or very big, because the reviews were so great. I saw the film, my review is out if you want to go take a look, but essentially I thought it was kind of not ready for prime time. It was fine, but it kind of felt, the writing and the performances kind of felt like it was for like a Saturday morning cartoon in all the worst ways. So my kind of, armchair, film analyst perspective here is, I think that tone of it feeling a little underbaked and aimed at a really, really young audience, like 6 to 8, as opposed to hitting, maybe more of like a 9 to 12. I think that hurt its ability to bring people in and then get people to go back, right? Because that's the name of the game. You don't make $2 billion, $3 billion from people just going once. You by definition, you need people to be going back over and over and over again. And I just don't think Transformers 1 has that in it to pull in those kind of numbers. So as of right now, it's brought in about 47 million domestically, 97 million worldwide, but it's off of a 100 million plus budget. So right now, after 3 weekends, it's still in the red. So it's definitely going to be disappointing for Paramount. But also, they didn't really market the film well or much at all. And then also still in the top 5, holding its 5th place spot, its 4th frame, the horror thriller with James McAvoy, Speak No Evil, bringing just a little under $3 million. This is having some decent legs here. Like I said, when this first came out, I kind of called this a flop. I mean, it seemed like it was going to be a flop at the time, but its worldwide box office has really helped it. So its worldwide is at like 67 million off of just a $15 million budget. And again, I said this last week, it's surprising that this is doing so well internationally, considering this is a remake of a Danish film. So it's like they already have the original. But in any case, this is, I would say is a moderate financial success. And then just lastly, still in the top 10, we have Deadpool and Wolverine. This is the one summer film still holding out. Inside Out 2, gone. Despicable Me 4, gone. Some of those earlier films, of course, are long gone, like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and The Fall Guy and all that stuff. So Deadpool and Wolverine, by virtue of it releasing so late into the summer season, is still in the top 10, but it's been in the top 10 for like 11 weeks now. It only dropped from 7th to 8th, made about $1.5 million. So again, at this point, it's just about every extra little push it can get. Because it's almost for the domestic multiple, it's almost at the green. It's almost at the 3.0 or greater mark. Because right now it's domestically around 634 million, worldwide 1.3 something billion dollars off of a $200 million budget. So again, Hollywood always takes the wrong lessons from success and failure. Disney and Marvel will definitely take some of those wrong lessons from this, but in any case, they can rest easy knowing that this financially was worth it for them. And looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have entering a wide release. So this film's technically already out, but it's in limited engagement. But it's this is Saturday night. The biopic's the wrong word because it's not about a specific person. It's about it's a dramatization of the first episode of Saturday Night Live and like the behind the scenes like drama to like get it on air. I've heard it's good but not great. It's projected to, going wide, it's projected to make around 9 to 12 million. I'm going to see it I think next week, once it's like officially out and everything. And I'm hoping it's good because I liked the trailers, which I wasn't thinking I was gonna like, because the idea of this film feels a little cynical, especially considering we're about to enter I think they've just entered their 50th season, so I'm sure it's no accident that the timing, I'm sure that timing is not coincidental. But I'm hoping it's good, and could it be a rewards contender? Probably not, but it can make a little chunk of change here. Also opening, we have the horror film Terrifier 3. I've never seen any of the Terrifier films. I don't really know much about it. I'm not very optimistic about this, but if it ends up being semi-good, maybe I'll go catch it. And it's projected to make about 5 to 8 million. Again, like I said at the beginning of this segment, this is the season where we're going to have a lot of smaller movies coming out. The big kind of blowing their load, so to speak, that Hollywood did was over the past couple months. And then we also have the controversial Donald Trump biopic, The Apprentice, finally getting an official theatrical release. I've done a couple stories on this movie if you want to check out the channel to kind of hear a little bit about the background of this. But it's going to be interesting to see how this does, and how this affects the election, if at all. It's very controversial. It's not super flattering of Donald Trump. It's only projected to make about 4 to 7 million. I got a comment here from JJ Because. Hello, JJ Because. I know who you are. I won't say your name in case you don't want people to know. But referencing Saturday Night, he says, quote, "It's actually pretty all right. Definitely some annoying bit, but also some interesting insights. It's fun to watch everyone act like an asshole." Exactly. That's like what I enjoyed watching the trailer, to see kind of like the chaos of it, and to see how everything's actually going to come together. I'm interested to see, like, the trailer almost makes it, especially near the end of the trailer, because it starts to get like really stressful and the editing becomes a lot more quick, and like the music starts to swell, and there's like this like ticking clock. Like, it almost feels like a thriller, like a comedy thriller, if that's even possible. So I imagine the actual film is not going to be like that. But the trailer release has piqued my interest. So hopefully it is, it's more than just fine. Because like, I expect it to be fine, but I'm hoping it's enjoyable and good and something I would want to watch again. Okay, just want to give a quick plug to reviews that I write. Cinema Cuso is not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I write written reviews for new movies coming out. I got 2 reviews that came out last week for Transformers 1 and My Old Ass. It would be really, really helpful, and really I would super appreciate if you could go check out those reviews. Comment and let me know all the reasons why you disagree with me. You can find the link to the Substack in the description down below. You can also just go to your browser and type in cinemacuso.substack.com. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, so let's talk about story number 1. So Diddy, a.k.a. Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, or I'll just call him Diddy, is facing lawsuits from 120 accusers, which may expose high-profile figures who were involved. So the Hollywood Reporter notes that these accusers are evenly split, men and women, which you would think it would be all women, but it's actually men and women across 25 states. And one of which was as young as 9 years old. So this is like really awful stuff. And so not only was one of them 9, but 25 of the 120 accusers were minors at the time. And this is even a comprehensive list. Basically, the prosecution or the lawyers basically put out like a call, like if you feel like you would fit these lawsuits, reach out to us. I think there was like 3,000 people who came forward, but then it was whittled down to these like 120 cases they felt like they could prove in court. The most gruesome accusation, which is saying something, right? Because they're all awful accusations, is that he filmed, not only sexually assaulted this woman, but he filmed it and then he sold it around for money. He would use it as collateral to keep the victim silenced, as well as if it involved anyone else, to keep them silent. I got a quote here from the lawyer Ariel Mitchell-Kidd saying, quote, "There already have been tapes leaking around Hollywood being shopped around, but one particular person contacted me to shop a particular video they were in possession of, and to contact the person who was in the video to see if they were interested in purchasing the video before it became public knowledge. I can tell the video was pornographic in nature. This was in his Atlanta home, and it does seem the person isn't looking into the video. To me, it doesn't seem like that person knows they're being videotaped," end quote. So there's this, I don't want to say rumor, because it's pretty, the lawyers have made it very explicit that these lawsuits are that there are people involved in this whole situation that are not just like random people that Diddy knew or hired. Like, there's some high profile people involved. So what this lawyer is talking about here is one of these videos that he would use as collateral. Someone high profile is in the video, but that person may not be aware that such a video even exists of them. So there's a lot of intrigue, right? Like, who are these people? Tony Busby, who's one of the lawyers for the accusers, says the lawsuit will name individuals who profited from or turned a blind eye to Diddy's crimes, saying, quote, "I expect through this process, many powerful people will be exposed, many dirty secrets will be revealed," end quote. So what's the context of all this? So this is really interesting because I have been following this whole Diddy controversy since it started last fall, about almost a year ago. It was November of 2023. And I've been purposely trying to avoid talking about it just because it was so overwhelming and so awful that I wasn't sure what I could possibly add to the conversation. And the past couple of weeks, there have been things where it almost became one of my stories for the week. But this particular accusation of, that this is not the end but the beginning of an unraveling of essentially conspiracy that could very well involve people that we all know and perhaps even love really well, right? So the context of all this, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, hugely successful rapper and producer and record executive. I grew up in the 2000s, so I primarily knew him as P. Diddy. I never knew him in his Puff Daddy, persona. And again, hugely successful, but again, like I said, November of 2023, he was accused of assault by the singer Cassie, and this became a domino effect, a snowball effect, whatever effect you want to call this. And more women started to follow suit, and it just became the dam just broke. And it really felt reminiscent of the Me Too moment, right? When that initial Harvey Weinstein, expose really went public and went mainstream. And not only did a bunch of people kept coming out accusing him of stuff, but how other people started getting accused, and it became just this tidal wave. And that's kind of how the past year has felt with all this Diddy stuff. So not only is he being accused of all this stuff, but, and I don't mean to let Harvey Weinstein off the hook, but his misconduct seemed very localized, where it would be like him and this woman, him and that woman, right? This eventually, in a surprise move, the Department of Homeland Security raided his premises, and he was later indicted for sex trafficking and racketeering. This, was the basis for something that, and he's talked about this in interviews before, we just didn't know what he was talking about, freak-offs, where essentially these large orgies, right, and victims were coerced into these days-long sex events. So Harvey Weinstein's this awful person, but this is like systemized, and this is a complex web of favors and exploitation and assault and violence. So I guess the main, not to keep circling the drain here, but I guess the primary thing I really wanted to talk about with this is who could these high profile figure or figures, plural, be? Now this could very well just be a bunch of smoke and no fire, right? But it seems unlikely that it's all smoke and no fire because, again, it's not like inside sources say that someone high profile. Like, the lawyers are explicitly making statements saying, like, you are going to be surprised when you see these names. And I got a quote here from Busby, who's one of the lawyers, like I said, saying, quote, "It's a long list already, and because of the nature of this case, we are going to make damn sure we are right before we do that. These names will shock you," end quote. So this idea that I think they're waiting to, like, really make sure that they have a credible case before revealing any high-profile figures. But again, it seems like this is going to be a bombshell revelation down the road. Now, when that bombshell revelation will happen remains to be seen. So, a recent article kind of following this comes from the Daily Beast. And so take all this with a grain of salt, because Daily Beast is like the bottom of legitimate news sources and at the top of, like, tabloid, right? It's like this weird intersection where it's not full-on tabloid and fake news and all this stuff, but, you know, it's way more willing to run stories that are maybe not super credible. Not that they're lies, but just maybe some more fact-checking is required. So take all this with a grain of salt. But Daily Beast, following these announcements, published an article outlining a claim from one of his dancers, right? So she claims that she was, quote-unquote, pimped out by Combs to have sex with high-profile guests. This is Adria Sherry English. She was a go-go dancer. And she says, quote, "He would send them in a room with me or another sex worker, record it, and then hold that over that celebrity or that influential person's head," end quote. So there's this system of abuse and exploitation that was not just abusing the victims, but then he would put these people in situations, film it, so then he could then use that as leverage over those people. And she names in this article people that were at some of Diddy's infamous parties, which include, but are not limited to, people like Diana Ross, Paris Hilton, Ja Rule, Busta Rhymes, Reverend Al Sharpton, and as you can see in the picture above my head, Donald Trump. She makes it very clear these figures didn't necessarily participate, and these sex acts did happen in secluded areas, like away from, like, the main party. So she admits that it's possible that they didn't really know what was going on. So I'm sure if someone like a Trump or Reverend Al Sharpton, because I don't think Diana Ross is alive anymore, I'm sure that's going to be the immediate defense. Like, we were there, everyone was there, I didn't see anything bad happening, I didn't know about anything bad happening, I'm innocent, I was not an enabler. But of course, anyone can say that, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they were in fact ignorant to what was going on. But again, this whole thing, and this is, I think, really the breaking point for me why I was finally ready to talk about this whole Diddy situation, is it's really reminding me of the Jeffrey Epstein whole can of worms. Even down to this quote from the lawyer Busby saying, quote, "The biggest secret in the entertainment industry that really wasn't a secret at all has finally been revealed to the world," end quote. Again, like Harvey Weinstein, like Jeffrey Epstein, it was kind of this open secret. So again, even if you have these high-profile figures named who are gonna say, undoubtedly, "Oh, I didn't know this was going on. If I had known, I never would." It's hard to believe those people, because, again, it seems like now in retrospect it was such an open secret that everyone was kind of aware of this, but they either didn't know the full extent, or they just didn't care, or they thought it wasn't their business, or they thought, "I don't want to challenge Diddy because he's a powerful person in the industry." And again, this is not just someone being a serial abuser like a Harvey Weinstein. This is systemized exploitation and abuse. And you have not only the people who participated, but then, of course, you have the people who enabled, right? You think of with Jeffrey Epstein, what was her name? Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Like, people who helped execute the system, who directly benefited and sometimes profited from these egregious acts of misconduct. And again, you have these high-profile figures who either participated in the abuse, or they knew and didn't participate, but they said nothing. And I imagine there's a lot of people right now who are really nervous about these revelations. They're really worried, am I going to be named? So again, this could end up being a big reckoning. Again, like we saw about 6 or 7 years ago with the Me Too movement, that we might see this avalanche of accusations and revelations that completely transform our understanding of certain celebrities, right? Because if you think about back to that Me Too moment, how so many celebrities that we never would have thought the day before that they could even possibly be tangentially related to this issue, it would come out and they've done like the worst thing imaginable, right? So it reminds us that celebrities are human beings. And I say that to absolve some of them of their faults because they're human, but also at the same time, they're human beings, right? They're not perfect, and some of them are gonna be involved and benefit or turn a blind eye to some really awful things happening in the industry. And I sympathize with the people who say nothing if they feel like they're gonna be hurt. I think if you still speak up, that's really courageous, but I'm not going to really get on like the random low-level dancer, right, in this situation who was kind of coerced into these situations for not speaking out sooner because they had a lot to lose. But there's a difference between people who have a lot to lose and then people who have a lot to gain and they don't want to, by speaking up, they wouldn't lose anything, they just wouldn't be able to gain anything from this anymore. And that's a big difference. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 2. So the Alec Baldwin film Rust, controversial. I've talked about this many times on my channel. It is finally having its world premiere this November. It's going to be at the Energia Camera Image. It's in Poland. It's an international cinematography film festival. For context, if you don't know anything about this movie, even if you know about all the drama with, of course, the tragic accidental shooting of the cinematographer, Helena Hutchins, when a prop gun that Alec Baldwin was holding was discharged, even if you know about that, you might not know anything about the movie, like what it's about. So I've pulled up the Letterboxd blurb here. And here's what it says. Quote, infamous outlaw Harlan Rust, so that's why it's called Rust, breaks his estranged grandson Lucas out of prison after Lucas is convicted to hang for an accidental murder. That's ironic. The two must outrun legendary U.S. Marshal Wood Helm and bounty hunter Fenton Preacher Lang, who are hot on their tails. Deeply buried secrets rise from the ashes, and an unexpected familial bond begins to form as the mismatched duo tries to survive the merciless American frontier, end quote. That's really a weird coincidence that this movie also involves an accidental death. The film, when it premieres at this festival, is going to be followed by a panel with director Joel Souza, who was also shot in this accidental shooting, but luckily survived. The DP, Bianca Klein, who replaced Helena Hutchins after she, obviously passed away from the gunshot wound. As well as Stephen Lighthill, who was Helena Hutchins' film school mentor at AFI, the American Film Institute. And the panel's going to involve this kind of multifaceted discussion surrounding the tragic events that happened on set, the importance of on-set safety, as well as just the general, women's role in cinematography. And I have a quote here from the festival director, Marek Zajdovich, I apologize, saying, quote, "We knew that our event was important to her and that she felt at home among cinematographers from all over the world who have been gathering at Camera Image for over 30 years. Together with cinematographers and film enthusiasts, we will have the special opportunity to remember her," end quote. Notably, Alec Baldwin will not be there. I think since he's the one who pulled the trigger, or supposedly did not pull the trigger, but ultimately since he was the one holding the gun, I think there's maybe some trauma there of, because if you watch the video of him when he was being questioned by police and they tell him that she died, his reaction is just heart-wrenching. So I would imagine he is like, I don't want to go see this. I don't want to go to this event. And it probably also has something to do with the fact that he, just recently won his legal case where they were trying to put him away for his culpability in the event. So again, for the context, this is a low-budget Western starring Alec Baldwin. In October of 2021, Baldwin's prop gun discharged with live ammo that shouldn't have been in there, killing Ukrainian DP Helena Hutchins. The armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, was this year convicted of manslaughter. And she's currently serving an 18-month prison sentence. Baldwin was also charged, but was later acquitted due to essentially malpractice by the prosecutor. And it's interesting because the film, was not done being filmed. So they ended up resuming production in April of 2023. Baldwin described completing the film as, quote, nothing less than a miracle, end quote. And the scene where Hutchins was shot has been removed, right? So that whatever moment that was supposed to be in the movie, they just cut the whole thing out. I'm sure they would be able to do it and ensure that it would be safe. But I think there was just maybe, again, like a collective trauma on the part of the crew. And the director, Joel Souza, even said as much, saying, quote, not just that, but also a few things leading up to it. I'm not going back to that, end quote. Because, again, he was not only, I'm sure it's traumatic for everyone on that set, but, again, he was shot. He also got hit by this bullet. So this really raises an interesting question. Should this film have been finished? And now being shown? Is it honoring her memory? Or is it disrespecting it? And I'm not sure. It's one thing, because of course you're going to have this kind of flowery language of like finishing it in her honor. I can't imagine this is going to be a very good film. Like, I'm not trying to make light of this, but is it really that important to finish this film? Is it really honoring her memory, even if it's not disrespecting it? Is it really honoring her memory to finish this film? I don't know. And I think if nothing else, the film existing at least serves as a cautionary tale, right? On-set safety is so important, especially when you are working with firearms, right? Even if it's a prop gun, because things like this can happen. And when I went to NYU for film school, little humble brag there, we had a whole class that we had to take called production safety. And this was before this happened. But we would go through over the course. It was like a half semester course. It was like maybe 6 or 7 weeks. And we had to go, and we went through all of these famous instances of like tragic preventable deaths on film productions, ranging from super indie and small to like big budget films, right? I imagine this is not only included in if NYU, I would imagine, still does this course, not only is this event included, I imagine this is like almost the primary, this is like the centerpiece of that curriculum. So it's just a really heartbreaking tragedy that was so preventable, right? It's so easily avoidable, but due to rushed production, lower budgets, inexperienced armorer, it was going to be a recipe for disaster. So if nothing else, the film being finished, everyone involved can finally put it past them and they can just move on, which is I think that's what they all need the most. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. These are some shorter stories this week. We're trying to get through these stories here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 3. So the Jonathan Majors film, Magazine Dreams, has landed a new distributor. It's going to be releasing the first quarter of 2025. So context for this, Magazine Dreams, here's the letterbox blurb to give you a little sense of the plot. Aspiring bodybuilder Killian Maddox struggles to find human connection in this exploration of celebrity and violence. Nothing deters him from his fiercely protected dream of superstardom, not even the doctors who warn him of the permanent damage he causes to himself with his quest, end quote. So this was a well-received, not overwhelming, but well-received 2023 Sundance film, directed by Elijah Bingham. It won the Creative Vision Jury Prize at the festival. And I got a quote here from the Hollywood Reporter's review by David Rooney, kind of talking about the film, saying, quote, "It's an all-in performance for the ages, layered with as much vulnerability as anger, and it's to Majors' credit that our hearts ache for Killian, even, or perhaps especially, when he's out of control. Majors and writer-director Elijah Binham managed the considerable feat of making us fear more for the intimidating colossus than the quivering employer he's standing over," end quote. And this kind of, there was a bidding war for this film between different indie distributors, between Neon and Sony Pictures Classic and HBO. Eventually it went, the rights went to Searchlight Pictures, formerly Fox Searchlight, so that's all part of Disney's kind of corporate apparatus. And this was like right before Jonathan Majors' career in public life imploded. Not long after this, he faced domestic assault and harassment allegations, which led to an indictment, which then led to a conviction. He's avoided jail time, but essentially got 1 year probation with therapy and other, I don't think quite community service, but basically this destroyed his career, right? And he was supposed to be the big bad villain Kang in the MCU, and the day of his conviction, Marvel announced that they were removing him from the film, and they've had to completely rethink their entire strategy for the MCU going forward, right? And subsequently, Searchlight also dropped the film, again, because no one wanted to release the film that is a big actor showcase for Jonathan Majors. So it was unclear if the film would ever be released. It has now been picked up by indie distributor Briarcliff Entertainment. So notably, they are also distributing the controversial Trump biopic The Apprentice this fall. So it's interesting, they're kind of carving out this weird niche of films no one wanted to distribute, or they were too afraid to distribute. I got a quote here from Briarcliff CEO Tom Ortenberg saying, quote, "Elijah's film made a well-deserved splash in Sundance, and Briarcliff is looking forward to taking his story to the big screen across the country in early 2025. Jonathan Majors' transcendent performance," so I don't know why you need to be praising him now. Jonathan Majors' transcendent performance as Killian Maddox will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most compelling and transformative roles in recent cinema history. We are honored to bring this extraordinary work to theaters nationwide, inviting audiences to witness a story that will resonate long after the credits roll," end quote. Again, the movie could be good, but it's interesting that they make a point to name drop Jonathan Majors, right? So this raises an interesting question of, should this film be released, right? Should the film be canceled, lowercase c, and then like also uppercase c, like canceled, like cancel culture, because the main star is this problematic figure, right? And I'm not sure how I feel about it, right? Because so many people are involved with a film, not just one actor. You could say that even if the director is bad, but especially with the actor, that the actor is merely a tool in the toolbox of the movie. Now, if the producers of the film were aware of any past misconduct and hired him anyway, well, that's a different story. But there is a danger of this movie, if it's well received by audiences, rehabilitating his image. People are forgiving when you're talented. And the film had been praised specifically for his performance. Can you separate the art from the artist? Yes, but, and that's my official answer. Yes, but. Yes, you could separate the art from the artist. Again, something is good or bad regardless of the virtues or faults of its creator or any participant in the creative process. And I get concerned when people try to, and I understand, and I think they're coming from a good place, so I'm not trying to be super critical here, but when people will say, like, oh, this director has done this awful thing, and it will be awful, right? So we should never watch their movies again. I find that long-term problematic because that instills this kind of subliminal message that bad people can't make good stuff. That ultimately something is bad because a bad person made it. And I think the issue with that is that it makes it easier for uber talented people to get away with stuff. Because if we've instilled this idea that things made by bad people are artistically bad, then again, people are forgiving when someone's talented. So if someone's really talented, they might go, well, he can't really be bad because he's so good as an actor. So I understand why people say that. And I think there is a valid concern, because in a vacuum you can separate everything. If it's like, a director from 100 years ago, like, it really doesn't matter anymore. But, you should still try to avoid supporting a problematic artist or creator or actor, whatever it is, because sometimes by supporting them in the moment, you're enabling them further, or enabling their enablers, right? So if it's a film, watching Annie Hall by Woody Allen, I don't think is really making that much of a difference. But if you're going to see Woody Allen's new movie, if enough people go, the people who decide to greenlight and distribute his movies feel confident, like, okay, we can keep doing this. Because studios really, the reason why Marvel kicked Jonathan Majors off of, kicked him out as Kang, is because they thought it would hurt them financially if they kept him on. They do not care about values at all. If this could have blown over, they would have been more than happy to do that. So I think there is something to the idea that you should try to avoid supporting these people, because, you vote with your dollars, right? But in a vacuum, I think you can separate the art from the artist. And, I think, again, so many people probably worked on this movie. I think it's good for the world to have this movie, but you should just be aware of who Jonathan Majors is, in all the context surrounding that, and kind of, if we can separate the art from the artist, that means you have to separate the artist from the art, if that makes sense. So you got to take the movie on its own and not give such flowers to Jonathan Majors. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So, in an exclusive from Variety, Lauryn Hill, hip-hop sensation, or maybe prior sensation, is being sued by Fugees co-member Pras Michel for fraud and breach of contract. This lawsuit concerns their abbreviated 2023 tour and canceled concerts that were supposed to happen this year. And he claims in this lawsuit that she mismanaged the tour, which the lawsuit claims, quote, was actually a veiled and devious attempt to make a big score for herself, end quote. So some background on the Fugees. They were a hip-hop group formed in 1990, consisting of Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, and Pras Michel. For the longest time, I thought it was a girl group, and there was like Lauryn Hill and like 2 other women, because of the song Killing Me Softly, but I guess she's just harmonizing with herself. So for like the longest time, I thought that it was like almost like the Spice Girls, but like better. And they were wildly popular for really blending all these different genres of blending reggae and R&B and funk and hip hop. And then after, I think they only made like 2 albums, and then they went on to do solo projects. Notably, Lauryn Hill went on to do The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which a lot of people say is one of the best hip-hop albums, if not one of the best albums of the 90s, if not one of the best albums of all time. And I would concur with that. I've listened to it. It's really great. The group briefly reunited in the mid-2000s, but again, it was very brief. And recently they announced a reunion tour. It was postponed due to the pandemic, and it was rescheduled to begin August 2024, but was canceled 3 days before the first show, with Hill citing, quote-unquote, serious vocal strain. So Michelle, again, in this lawsuit, is targeting Hill, and he makes a bunch of claims. So I'd like to kind of walk through all these claims here. So he claims the tour should have been, quote, a huge commercial success, since most of the shows for the entire arena-sized tour were sold out in advance, end quote. But the tour budget, which Hill controlled, was, quote, so bloated with unnecessary and most likely fictitious expenses that seemed designed to lose money, end quote. He also complains that Hill tarnished the band's brand due to chronic tardiness to concerts. She once even said, quote, "You're saying she's late a lot. Yo, y'all lucky I make it on this stage every night. God is the one who allows me to do it," end quote. And Variety notes that she recently hit the stage 4 hours late for a concert in Nairobi in Kenya. That's preposterous. Even for concert standards, that's ridiculous. And the lawsuit outlines some pretty damning anecdotes, which I would like to go through now. So Hill supposedly approached Michelle and Jean about doing the tour because she, quote, realized that the only chance for her to perform at arena-sized venues and feed her insatiable ego would be to reunite with Michelle and Jean and build the 25th anniversary tour as a Fugees tour, end quote. And supposedly Hill allegedly took advantage of Michelle's financial situation. So Variety notes that at the time he was paying, and still to this day, he's paying mounting legal fees for a Department of Justice legal battle. He's a co-defendant. This is like really convoluted. So he's a co-defendant of financier Joe Low, who allegedly stole $4.5 billion from Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund known as 1MDB in one of the world's largest financial scandals ever. And he also illegally contributed, he being Michelle, illegally contributed to Obama's 2012 presidential campaign. So Michelle is kind of claiming that Hill knew this and kind of pushed those buttons and squeezed that because she knew he needed money. He also says in the lawsuit, quote, Hill was taking 40% of the tour guarantees and tour net profits off the top for herself, leaving the remaining 60% to be equally between Hill, Pross, and Wyclef. And when they realized this, they demanded an audit of the finances, and Hill refused. She also, this is like one of the funnier anecdotes here that got a lot of attention. She turned down $5 million, a $5 million offer for the group to play at Coachella. And the reason was because she felt snubbed because the band, no doubt, was given top billing over the Fugees. So she said no. And the lawsuit says, quote, Hill's arrogance was again demonstrated when she unilaterally rejected a $5 million offer to play Coachella. The reason was that her ego was bruised since the group no doubt would be receiving top billing over the Fugees. Hill never told press about the offer or that she had rejected it. Press only learned about it when it was too late after Hill, in an astonishing display of hubris, asked Pross if he would agree to perform a few Fugees songs for free as the opening act for her son, Y.G. Marley, who was slated to perform at the same Coachella festival. End quote. So that's ridiculous that she basically just unilaterally decided, we're not going to do this because I'm not getting top billing. And again, if Michelle really needs this money, I'm sure he didn't mind if they were second billing or whatever they were, right? The lawsuit also alleges that Hill entered into the agreement with Live Nation for an 18-show Fugees U.S. tour. She never disclosed the agreement to Michelle, saying, and the lawsuit says, quote, because of the gross mismanagement by Hill and her company, who had taken far too long to close the deal with Live Nation, the 2024 U.S. tour ticket sales were dismal. There was little or no marketing for the tour and not enough time between the announcement and the first concert date to do sufficient advanced sales to justify the tour, end quote. And as a result, Live Nation canceled the whole tour. Again, like right before the tour was supposed to start. And people in the media started speculating about why this was happening. And Hill clapped back, now we know lying, saying, quote, last year, I faced an injury that necessitated the rescheduling of some of my shows. Regrettably, some media outlets penchant for sensationalism and clickbait headlines have seemingly created a narrative that has affected ticket sales for the North American portion of the tour, end quote. So these are all pretty damning accusations in this lawsuit. And of course, as one who is damningly accused does, Lauryn Hill has pushed back on all these claims, right? Her attorney, Howard King, has said, quote, it is particularly disappointing that the suit fails to reveal that Pross was grossly over-advanced for the last tour to help him pay his mounting legal bills. His failure to show appreciation for the financial help Miss Hill has afforded him in his time of need is disappointing. This action will be aggressively defended and defeated, end quote. And Rolling Stone notes Hill has made some counterclaims in the light of this lawsuit. So she notes that again, Michelle was given an overpaid advance of $3 million. He had yet to, quote unquote, repay substantial loans she made as, quote, an act of goodwill for him to pay off legal fees. And she claims she included the other members of the Fugees to help them, not herself. This idea that she approached them because she wouldn't be able to fill the stadiums on her own, she's saying is baloney. She's saying, quote, the tour was expanded to incorporate the Fugees because I found out that Pross was in trouble and would need money to aid his legal defense, end quote. So, this is very much a he said, she said situation. She's very much taking the position of, no, me? little old me, I was just trying to help. And now he's saying I screwed him over. So this whole situation just reminds us that some stars are assholes and some stars are just super entitled. And it's the classic artist or celebrity story where ego takes over and art gets pushed to the side, or it plays second fiddle to the demands of the ego. Sometimes in this case, the insatiable ego. And speaking of music, this is like a little pet peeve of mine. Really, it's a big pet peeve. I never understood why concerts start way later than the scheduled time. For example, me and my fiance Viviana just went to a Bowling for Soup concert recently in New York City, which was a lot of fun. There were 2 opening acts. The concert was supposed to start at 6:30. Bowling for Soup did not go on until 9 o'clock in the evening. At that point, why not just make it a later time? I just don't understand. And it's not even, okay, with the opening acts, of course, they're going to start later. But the opening act, I don't think, started at 6:30, right? Like why not just make it later if you're going to do it later? And it just goes to show, especially musicians, that there's a sense of, again, entitlement and ego. And, Michelle tried to allude to this without explicitly saying why this all happened, but after the tour was abruptly canceled, Michelle had said to fans, quote, "Everyone's frustration has been building up. This is not something that just happened overnight. My frustration was for the fans. They are paying their hard-earned money to see you," end quote. So, Michelle's stance is both self-interested, which if these accusations are true, I mean, more power to him, because he sounds like he got screwed. But also, again, kind of like what I'm saying, like ultimately your fans are the ones that sustain you. And you need to have a little bit more respect for that relationship and that balance. Ultimately, Lauryn Hill is a very complicated and controversial character, right? She's incredibly talented as both a songwriter and as a singer and performer. But again, she's chronically late to these concerts. She briefly went to prison for tax evasion, just for a couple months, but still. And, she doesn't shy away from rambling about whatever she wants to talk about. Talking about concerts, just kind of in between songs, just going on these rants that take too long. And, sometimes she says things that are maybe a little problematic, right? So she's a problematic fave for sure. It'll be interesting to see if what happens with this lawsuit. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5. So DirecTV and Dish Network are set to merge, the 2 big satellite TV distributors in the United States. So DirecTV will acquire Dish from Dish's parent company, EchoStar. If you don't know, EchoStar is a kind of a second-tier wireless provider. In the acquisition, they'll also be acquiring Sling TV, which is an internet streaming service. The deal is valued at around $10 billion. That's not how much they're paying for it necessarily. The deal only has a nominal consideration of $1. So if you don't know anything about contract law, a nominal consideration, basically contracts are only enforceable if there's an exchange of value. So sometimes in situations like this, because really what's happening is DirecTV is going to be assuming Dish's net debt of roughly $10 billion. So the idea is that to make the contract enforceable, they'll just put $1 or some other trivial amount. But really the deal is about acquiring the company and assuming its debt. I got a quote here from DirecTV CEO Bill Morrow saying, quote, "With greater scale, we expect a combined DirecTV and Dish will be better able to work with programmers to realize our vision for the future of TV, which is to aggregate, curate, and distribute content tailored to customers' interests, and to be better positioned to realize operating efficiencies while creating value for customers through additional investment," end quote. Forbes notes that a part of the deal will also include a VMVPD, which stands for a virtual multi-channel video programming distributor. So essentially those are systems and platforms that allow users to stream cable channels without cable connections, right? So I'm trying to think of an example, but maybe YouTube TV would be an example, right? You don't get a cable subscription, but you are still able to access these channels. The deal is expected to close in the fourth quarter of 2025, so we still have about a year before this would be finalized. A deadline notes that the acquisition would make DirecTV by default now the largest U.S. pay TV operator. Right now, I forget who is the biggest. It might be either Charter or Spectrum. But if they were to combine, their combined user base or consumer or customer base would amount to about a quarter, about 25% of the U.S. market. Unrelatedly, but at the same time, in addition to all this, AT&T will sell its 70% equity stake in DirecTV to TBG Incorporated, which is like a private equity firm that already owns 30% of DirecTV. And they're going to be selling that to them for about $6.5 billion. And the companies both say that deal is not contingent on the acquisition of Dish, but they announced it on the same day, right? So this is just a really interesting story about satellite TV, right? So this is a technology that became widespread in the mid-1990s, and it offered an alternative to monopolistic cable, right? The technology of satellite at the time, because obviously the internet was growing, but not to the level where you could stream content in this way. So the technology of satellites allowed channels from all over the world, right? And because of that technology, it's really great for consumers who live in rural areas without strong cable infrastructure, right? Like because I live in New York City, if I'm deciding to go get a cable provider, or for example, like with internet, because of monopolies, most internet companies also do cable, which is why AT&T got into the DirecTV business in the first place. But like we switched from Spectrum to Verizon, the infrastructure for the internet was already in our building, right? Whereas if you live in a rural area, you might not have that. So satellite technology really opened up some possibilities for consumers who maybe would be left out or would be prohibitively expensive. Downsides of satellite TV has issues, right? During intense weather events like rainstorms. And there's really only the two major players in the United States, DirecTV and Dish, and now there'll only be one. And like cable, it has struggled in the streaming era, right? Variety notes that both companies have offered internet-delivered pay TV packages, but these revenues have not offset the losses of people churning and unsubscribing or canceling their satellite television subscriptions, right? So this is raising interesting antitrust questions, right? So you have two major satellite TV companies. Those two companies combining into one dominant company would normally raise some concerns, right? But Variety notes that they would have a combined 18 million customers, but that would be down 63%, almost 2/3 from their peak levels in 2016. And it's not a big. Ultimately, I guess to put it, casually, it's not a big deal. Because while there would now only be one major satellite TV provider in the United States, satellite TV's place in the market is considerably small. One company dominating an underperforming sector of an industry does not a monopoly make necessarily. Because satellite is, while DirecTV will be individually the biggest pay TV provider, the share of satellite is way smaller than the share of cable, and especially streaming, right? And principal analyst at MoffettNathanson, Craig Moffett, kind of put it best here, saying, quote, "It's hard to imagine that regulators would block a deal. Better to have one satellite TV operator than none," end quote. Variety notes that EchoStar, could have faced a potential bankruptcy by holding on to Dish, because ultimately neither Dish nor DirecTV can survive on its own. Because of the downsizing of traditional pay TV in favor of streaming, if both companies were forced to be separate, there's no way either of them would have survived for much longer. And it could give them, it will give them greater negotiating power with companies like Disney. If you've been following the channel, I did a story about this recently. Disney and DirecTV got into a contract dispute about rights and being able to provide different bundle packages for customers. If they have a bigger share of the pay TV market, that would definitely give them a little bit more leverage. And again, but because of the shrinking of the traditional pay TV market, this wouldn't have been possible decades ago. And Forbes notes that the two companies proposed a $26 billion merger back in 2002, which was rejected by the DOJ at the time, because again, that would have been anti-competitive. Now, not as much. Though this isn't necessarily all upside because, mergers mean layoffs. It inevitably, I don't think there's ever been a merger that didn't involve some layoffs, right? Because when you combine two companies, there are going to be redundant positions or departments even that need to be downsized or eliminated entirely, right? You might want lots of people for your marketing team, but you don't necessarily need, like if you're combining your two companies, you might not need a marketing team that now combines both of them, right? You might decide, okay, we're going to fire half of you, right? Because we don't need all of you anymore. Though the press release says the merger will, quote, generate cost synergies of at least $1 billion per annum, so per year, end quote. Again, my understanding of this is most cost synergies are going to be layoffs, right? Because again, how else are you going to save money? Lest you are talking about having that better negotiating power when negotiating with companies like Disney. So, and again, the other facet of this, of AT&T kind of pulling their stake out of DirecTV, again, reflects, and as well with the fact that EchoStar is the one selling off Dish, reflects wireless companies getting out of entertainment. So there's this moment, maybe about a decade or so ago, where, it seemed like wireless companies might really become major players in the entertainment space. AT&T, acquired Warner Media. I think it was like the mid-2010s. But in 2021, they spun out DirecTV. So while owning a 70% stake, it was no longer a direct subsidiary of AT&T. And it was also at the same time they spun out Warner Media to go merge with Discovery. So now we have Warner Brothers Discovery. And it's interesting because EchoStar originally was one company, and then it spun out Dish in 1996. So it decided, we're going to spin out the satellite TV portion of our business, and we're just going to focus on the satellite wireless cellular business. They then remerged January of this year, so about 9 or 10 months ago, and now, less than a year later, they're selling it to pay off the larger company's debts. So it's just interesting to see this experiment just fall on its face for all these wireless companies. But at the end of the day, this business model is going to die out anyway, right? Further investment in broadband and internet, basically making it easier for people to have access to not only internet, but good internet across the country. It's going to allow more people to choose internet distribution as the way they consume media. You're still going to, I think in the future, you will still have live programming and channels, but eventually it'll all be over the internet rather than cable or satellite. And, usually you see mergers happen in contracting industries. The entertainment industry has been struggling. And I wouldn't be surprised if within the next decade, DirecTV, a satellite company, merges with a major cable company like Charter, I'm trying to think of another one, because I think Charter controls Spectrum, right? But any of these cable companies, which today would be impossible because that would be really anti-competitive. But in 10 years, again, I think the share of people's media consumption when it will be so small when it comes to traditional pay TV, I would not be surprised if you see this combination of cable and satellite. Put them together, we have to fight against the streaming services. Okay, that wraps up the show. Kind of a shorter show. Kind of some shorter stories this week, but hopefully I was able to bring some insights to them. Just want to give a few quick plugs. I have a sister YouTube channel to this one called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment, in a more written video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guess it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these kind of cartoon versions of myself, this older and younger version of myself. It's a lot of fun. Feel free to check out the video. It really would be a huge help. Go comment and let me know how you disagree with everything I've said. You can find the link to that in the description below. Also want to give a quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's Why I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing Star Wars, which is super exciting. We just released our episode on Revenge of the Sith, the movie that made me want to make movies. So that's really exciting. You can go check that out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us down in the description below. And finally, I want to give another quick plug to Cinnamon Cuso. Like I said earlier, it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I cover new films coming out, right? Written reviews for them. It's a lot of fun. I've been doing it for over 2 years now, almost 3 years now. I have over 100 reviews at this point. It really be a huge help if you go check those out. Again, comment and let me know what you think of the reviews, what you agree with, what you disagree with. You can find the link in the description below, or you can just go to your search bar, type in cinnamoncuso.substack.com. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you haven't already, please like this video. It really, really helps with the engagement in YouTube algorithm so people can find the channel. If you haven't already, subscribe. It really would be a huge help. We're trying to grow the community. Well, without further ado, thank you all so much for watching this week. Until next time, peace out.